You almost scrolled past this. If this finds you, you're not meant to stay ordinary. You know the sensation, a flash of clarity, a synchronicity that makes your heart skip, a project that begins to fall into place, and then, inevitably, the momentum dies. You double down, you try harder. Sometimes something shifts, other times everything unravels, and you're left wondering if the spiritual practices, the visualization, the effort, or the prayer were ever the point. There's a pattern here. There's a missing piece that separates the hit-or-miss life from consistent, reliable craftsmanship of inner power. If this lands on you, type the words, "I recognize both states." A small declaration anchors attention. Just a single line. No ritual, no magic. A marker. You're noticing. I've been where you are. I remember the nights when I convinced myself that if I could just get one more ritual right, one more plan executed, one more mental image sharpened, the world would reorganize to match my intent. I journaled, I meditated, I scheduled, I showed up. Sometimes it worked, often it did not. That inconsistency began to feel like a moral failing, as if I alone had misread the handbook of reality. Then there was the breakdown. Not the dramatic movie breakdown, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes after months of pushing, when you find yourself exhausted not by labor, but by the friction inside your chest. I sat on the floor of my little apartment at 2 a.m. with a list of goals that looked like accusations. I had been operating from the posture of doing for so long that the very intention to do had calcified into a way of being, a particle trapped in a pattern. The harder I pushed, the more the system resisted. The paradox was brutal. Effort had become the obstacle. Something shifted that night, but it wasn't a miracle delivered to me by an external force. It was a small internal reconfiguration, a loosening of insistence. I stopped trying to make a particular outcome happen for the space of an hour. I let attention widen, breathed in a pattern that felt like receptive listening rather than tactical planning, and noticed how my mind began to assemble possibilities I hadn't been able to see when my muscles were clenched around the plan. Over the next days, circumstances reorganized in ways I hadn't engineered, not because I stopped acting, but because my actions arose from a different ground. That experience became a decoder ring for everything that followed. It revealed a simple operational frame. Consciousness moves between two complementary modes. For convenience, call them the particle mode and the wave mode. These labels borrow imagery from physics, but think of them first and foremost as metaphors that map onto our everyday experience. Particle mode is how we behave when we're concentrated, focused, localized. It's the doer, task lists, deadlines, skill application, deliberate repetition.
It's the hand that builds, the muscle that lifts, the attention that narrows. In particle mode, you're engaging the world directly. That energy is necessary for finishing projects, placing a phone call, filing for a permit, or rehearsing an important speech. It's how we produce in form. Wave mode is the field. It's the open, receptive intelligence that notices patterns before they're solved. It's the context in which synchronicities happen, the hum that arranges circumstances around an intention without the need to micromanage. In that mode, you feel less like a single point and more like a field of possibility. Inspiration surfaces, creativity opens, systems reorganize around a settled pole. Neither mode is morally higher. Neither mode is a permanent home. Mastery is the skillful shifting between them, knowing when to narrow and execute and when to widen and allow. The mechanism that controls movement between these modes is what I call coherence versus decoherence. Coherence is alignment, belief, attention, emotion, and action moving in the same direction. When those elements line up, the system stabilizes in a mode that supports the work at hand. Decoherence is the fragmentation that happens when parts pull in different directions. Desire without commitment, belief without action, attention scattered across too many small urgencies. Decoherence is noise. It collapses potential into confusion. Imagine iron filings around a magnet. When the field is clear and steady, the filings align into visible patterns. When you wobble the magnet or introduce another field nearby, the filings scatter. That scattering is decoherence. The filings are not faulty. The field is. In life, you are both the filings and the field maker. Small shifts in how you hold attention, how you feel about a goal, how you speak to yourself, and how you act can produce massive reorganizations if you understand which mode is required and whether your system is coherent. This is why so many spiritual practices and manifestation techniques feel like arrows that sometimes miss. You may be using a wave technique, open attention, receptive sitting, ritual of allowance, while the task in front of you needs particle energy, clear deadlines, precise steps, measurable commitments. Or you might be in particle mode, pushing and doing, when the situation actually wants a field opening, a period of non-interference where other systems can align. When you mismatch mechanism and state, the result is friction. You've probably noticed this in your relationships. You try to force a conversation to land in a certain way, the other person rises with resistance. You stop trying, and suddenly the conversation happens more easily. You set a goal, then spend weeks in a state of vague yearning. Nothing changes. When you make a small, measurable step, one phone call, one scheduled meeting, things begin to reconfigure.
The same pattern plays out in creativity, finances, health routines, and spiritual deepening. Because this is the core insight, the practice that matters most is not more techniques, but better state navigation. That means learning to read the felt sense, the internal barometer that tells you whether you are coherent or decoherent, and then matching your method to the state you're in. Here are several signals I wish someone had given me earlier. These are practical diagnostics you can use today to know where you're operating. First signal, chronic effort without results. You are busy. You are exhausted in the same way every week. You hold long lists of self-help tasks and spiritual practices, and each item feels like a condemnation rather than a development. You believe in the possibility of change, but every new attempt feels like proof you failed before. The felt sense here is friction and heaviness in the chest. Motivation feels like an engine running without traction. Diagnosis: particle energy is being applied, but coherence is absent because belief, attention, and action are misaligned. Micro-prescription: simplify. Pick one measurable action and apply it with focused attention for a short, defined period. The particle is needed, but only if the system is made coherent through small wins that rebuild belief. Second signal, wave experiences that don't translate into form. You have rich spiritual openings, goosebumps, profound insights, the sense of dissolving into something vaster. Yet projects stagnate and your calendar remains a mess. The felt sense is airy, diffuse, sometimes euphoric followed by a slump. Diagnosis: you may be lingering exclusively in wave mode without grounding into form. Micro-prescription: schedule small, concrete steps the day after an opening. Allow the field to inspire a plan, then use particle energy to bring one inspired item into the world. Third signal, frequent synchronicities without follow-through. Doors open in curious ways. People appear at the right moment. Ideas show up fully formed. Yet months later, you can't point to a sustained outcome. The felt sense is an excited restlessness, adrenaline spikes followed by emptiness. Diagnosis: decoherence often sits between curiosity and commitment. Micro-prescription: apply a commitment test. If an opportunity appears, test it with a 30-minute focused session or one specific email. See if the field responds to small, aligned action. Fourth signal, spiritual highs that fade quickly. You have peaks of clarity and insight that feel like revelations, but don't translate into identity change. The felt sense is brightness followed by blankness. Diagnosis: your inner narrative has not updated to hold the new information. Coherence between new belief and habitual action is missing.
Micro-prescription: create a simple ritual to reinforce new belief. A short statement you repeat anchored in a physical gesture, so that cognition and somatic experience begin to align. Fifth signal, exhaustion despite idleness. You rest, you don't take action, but you remain depleted. The felt sense is a dull ache and mental fuzziness. Diagnosis: passive avoidance breeds decoherence when the system resists facing necessary decisions. Neither particle nor wave is applied skillfully. Micro-prescription: take one small courageous action that restores agency. A call, a simple organizing task, then allow a period of widened attention. Sixth signal, repeated small wins that vanish. You experience tiny successes that don't compound. The felt sense is fleeting triumph followed by the sense of the rug being pulled. Diagnosis: your system is intermittently coherent but lacks sustained integration. Micro-prescription: design micro-habits that anchor the win into identity. A 5-minute daily check-in that records what worked and why. The felt sense is the diagnostic instrument. Practice it like you would practice reading a gauge.
Emotions are not moral verdicts, they are data. When you feel contraction, something needs aligning. When you feel expansion, steward the field. When you feel confusion, stop and calibrate. The point is not to judge yourself, but to map the terrain of your inner states and learn which tool belongs where. This is where the idea of the 7 souls becomes useful. Instead of a single you trying to do everything, think of 7 patterns of presence, 7 operating archetypes that people commonly embody. Each soul has a dominant orientation toward particle or wave, a signature felt sense, a particular set of mismatches, and a single immediate move that will reduce decoherence and restore functional power. There are 7 because humans tend to organize tendencies into a small set of repeated motifs. You will recognize one or more of them when you hear their description. If any of these descriptions finds you, consider it a personal invitation. You're being called to move beyond ordinary oscillation toward conscious navigation. The doer. I must make it happen. Signature behavior, relentless planning, checklist worship, and an identity built around productivity. Felt sense, tightness in the jaw and a buzzing stomach. Focus that narrows until peripheral possibilities collapse. Mismatch risk, applying force in situations that require field opening, producing burnout and closed opportunities. Micro-prescription, choose one task that truly matters and execute it with short, fierce attention. Before executing, take a breath ritual, 3 slow diaphragmatic breaths that shift the nervous system from grip to poised focus. Then act. Use particle energy with coherence. Align belief, this step will lead somewhere, with a measurable result and the emotion of calm confidence. The field. Things unfold around me.
Signature behavior, receptivity, trusting synchronicity, spending long stretches in meditation, dreaming big without immediate deadlines. Felt sense, a soft, spacious quality in the chest, mornings where you wake open to possibility. Mismatch risk, passivity that avoids the necessary form building of life, missed deadlines, unrealized ideas. Micro-prescription, translate an inspiration into a single, specific action within 24 hours. It can be one email, one sketch, one 5-minute prototype. The goal is not to break the field, but to give the field a hinge into form. The oscillator, back and forth burn. Signature behavior, switching between hyperactivity and total collapse, cycles of intense doing followed by avoidance. Felt sense, whiplash, one moment energized, the next hollow and indifferent. Mismatch risk, inconsistent results, reputation of unreliability, erosion of trust with self and others. Micro-prescription, institute micro-pauses. Before starting a task, check in. What state am I in? If you're in high reactivity, delay commitment by 5 minutes and breathe into stability. If you're collapsed, do a 1-minute activation. Stand, stretch, write one line, before action. The trialed seeker, I've tried everything. Signature behavior, long history of following methods and patterns, skepticism and resignation. Felt sense, heaviness and guarded hope, a voice that says, this time it won't stick. Mismatch risk, cycling through teachers and techniques without integrating previous learning, credibility erodes into cynicism. Micro-prescription, reframe the experiment. Choose one approach you've already tried but decrease scope dramatically. Instead of a 3-month overhaul, commit to a single, small, measurable experiment for 7 days and record the data. The aim is to rebuild trust through tiny, repeatable evidence. If you hear yourself in these 4, notice how each one reveals a different kind of decoherence. Not a moral failing, but a structural mismatch between method and situation. Where the doer needs to temper force with a field hinge, the field needs to translate openness into concrete tests. The oscillator needs stabilizing rituals, and the trialed seeker needs micro-evidence to rebuild trust. There are 3 more souls, archetypes that navigate the interplay between subtlety and form in different ways. I'll introduce their names so you know they exist, and then we'll move into the practical bridge work that unites them. The aligner is the integrator who sustains coherence. The disassociated is the one who skirts pain through spiritual bypass and needs grounding. The catalyst is the soul that moves beyond personal needs to orchestrate coherence in collective fields. Each of these remaining 3 has its own signature behaviors and a precise next step. The aligner, for instance, often knows how to hold intention and action together, but can be reluctant to amplify. Their move is to widen influence through tiny public acts. The dissociated thinks alignment is purely internal and neglects boundaries. Their move is to anchor in a simple physical practice that returns them to the body. The catalyst sometimes overassumes responsibility for others' resonance and needs to learn containment, a way to affect fields without absorbing them. Right now, notice which of the 7 names landed like a magnet on your chest. If more than one did, that's normal. People are composites. We cycle. The skill is not to declare yourself permanently fixed to one label, but to use the label as a diagnostic tool, a pointer that shows the most useful next step. This work is not about becoming a different person. It's about reducing internal interference so that the person you already are can operate with more integrity and less friction. Recognition changes the system. Once you can name the pattern, you can intervene. So what does intervention look like at the simplest level? It starts with 2 small moves you can practice today, not as promises, but as experiments. The first is noticing without immediate correction. For 1 hour, whenever you feel a surge of emotion or a tightening around a goal, register it with a short internal phrase. Doing if the energy feels concentrated and activated, field if the energy feels open and receptive, fuzzy if you feel scattered. Don't analyze, just name. This is not self-criticism, it's data collection. The goal is to increase your literacy of inner states. The second move is the one I used the night I stopped pushing so hard, alignment microsteps. After your hour of noticing, pick one situation that's currently unresolved. Ask, does this require particle work or wave attention? If particle, schedule a focused block of time with a clear outcome and remove distractions. If wave, schedule a practice of receptivity around it, a deliberate non-action where you allow ideas to surface, perhaps in the form of a short walk, a 20-minute open journal, or sitting in silence with a question held lightly. These 2 moves are deceptively simple because they reframe the problem. You no longer ask, why isn't this working? You ask, which state does this situation need, and am I coherent in providing it? That question changes the work. It turns practice into craftsmanship. This is the point where I usually pause, because the temptation in a message like this is to rush into a list of 5 more techniques, 3 longer rituals, and a downloadable cheat sheet. That would be helpful in some ways, but more useful is to make sure the frame is solid. You can begin doing the noticing and the microsteps now. They will be the scaffolding for the deeper protocols that follow. I want to tell you one more short story before we get to the practical day-by-day protocols. It's about a friend, not a hero, not mythic, a person who embodies the problem and its small solution. A few years after my own wake-up, a colleague named Maya reached out. She'd been oscillating between furious productivity and spiritual overwhelm. Her business stalled every time she got serious. She'd try a new branding push, burn herself out, then go deep into retreats to recover. Nothing compounded. She was becoming convinced that the tools were lies. We experimented. First, she practiced the noticing for 3 days. She began to mark moments. Doer, field, fuzzy. The simple act of labeling shifted something. A small part of her brain that had been hijacked by judgment relaxed. On day 4, a contract opportunity arrived. Usually, she would have launched into a flurry of emails and proposals and then crash. This time, she asked, what does this actually require? We mapped the task. The negotiation needed particle rigor for the initial call and wave receptivity afterward to allow the other party to decide. She scheduled a 30-minute focused call prep, made the call, then stepped into a 2-day field practice where she allowed the relationship to breathe. The contract arrived in 2 weeks, and more importantly for her, it held. The pattern scaled. Not because she found a secret, but because she learned to match the state to the mechanism. Maya's story is not intended to impress you with its result. It's intended to show the simplest truth. When you become an artisan of state, small decisions stop being random, they become tools. We're at the edge of a deeper map. I've explained the core frames, shown the signals, and introduced the first 4 of the 7 souls in practical terms. I've given you 2 micro-movements you can try this afternoon. The rest of the map, the detailed prescriptions for the aligner, the disassociated, and the catalyst, plus a step-by-step 2-day micro-protocol that trains you to switch states reliably, is where the real training begins. Before we go there, take a moment and notice this. Recognition changes nervous systems. The act of naming the pattern you're in loosens habitual reactivity. This is not metaphysical fluff, it's a practical lever. You don't have to overhaul your life tonight. You do need to learn the grammar of your states so you can speak to reality in the right register. If any of the earlier archetypes landed in you, the doer, the field, the oscillator, the trial seeker, hold that recognition like a small compass. In the next section, I'll walk you through precise, step-by-step practices that teach you not just to notice, but to move, to shift state on purpose, to build coherence that sustains results, and to begin practicing influence in collective contexts without burnout. This is the point where most people decide whether they will continue experimenting or return to familiar habits.
The choice is not dramatic, it's humble. It's the choice to try the noticing for 1 hour, to pick a single task, to refine one habit. It's the choice to stop treating inconsistency as a character flaw and to treat it as a solvable pattern.
There is one more thing to say about the ethics of this work. Steering states is not a technique for bypassing responsibility or for manipulating others. It's an invitation to become more reliable, more present, and more integrated. The aim is not to force outcomes, but to become a clearer instrument through which possibilities can pass. When you're ready, we'll proceed to the hands-on protocols, the 2-day experiment that trains state matching, the micro-rituals that anchor coherence, and the practice that guards against spiritual bypass. We'll also unpack the last 3 souls with specific moves that restore balance and amplify influence. For now, breathe and notice. Which soul whispered your name when the list came through? Keep that recognition close. It's the exact place to begin. The aligner, the disassociated, the catalyst, these 3 complete the 7. I owe you their full prescriptions because they are the ones that either sustain coherence or quietly erode it, often without anyone noticing. The aligner. I mean what I do, and I do what I mean. Signature behavior, small daily practices that consistently bind intent to action, a tendency to ritualize progress, a careful curator of habits. Felt sense, a steady warmth at the sternum, a quiet confidence that isn't loud but persists like a light kept trimmed. Mismatch risk, reluctance to reveal work publicly, a tendency to keep coherence private rather than letting influence spread. This can produce small, stable results that never scale, because the aligner assumes the inner work alone will create systemic change. Micro-prescription, widen just one small thing. Pick a modest, visible act that shares your coherence with one other person or the public sphere. It might be posting one short update about a small win, offering a 5-minute call to someone you care about, or reading a tiny piece of your work aloud in a public space. The aim isn't exposure for ego, it's letting coherence meet external friction and test itself. If your internal field is stable, if belief, attention, emotion, and action are aligned, a small outward step will hold. Do it with the same care you give to your rituals. Set a clear intention, perform a short breath or grounding gesture beforehand, then take the public step and record what changes. The disassociated. If I stay spiritual, I won't feel the hard things. Signature behavior, frequent retreat into practices that numb discomfort, long silent sits, endless study, spiritual jargon that explains away boundaries. Felt sense, a cool separation through the chest, a driftiness that feels like floating above life rather than inside it. Mismatch risk, spiritual practice becomes avoidance. The disassociated can create beautiful inner landscapes, but fail to enact necessary boundaries, tasks, or relationship repairs. The field is airy, but the structure is missing. Micro-prescription, return to the body.
Pick 3 grounded, low-meaning tasks. Clearing a small physical space, washing a mug with deliberate attention, walking 3 minutes barefoot if it's safe, and do them as a deliberate practice of presence. Anchor each task with a 1-sentence mantra, I am here. The aim is not to denigrate inner work, but to integrate it with somatic discipline, so that wave intelligence has a body to inhabit. The catalyst. I want to move the field. Signature behavior, organizing, convening, initiating projects that invite collective coherence, a restless generosity that takes on other people's dissonance. Felt sense, an electric warmth across the torso, urgency mixed with fatigue when work is overextended. Mismatch risk, absorbing other states, over-responsibility, burnout disguised as service. Catalysts can create remarkable openings for many people, but lose themselves in the process. Micro-prescription, learn containment. Before any convening or offer of help, perform a 3-step boundary-forming ritual. Name the intention you will hold, set a clear time boundary, and perform 2 slow exhalations, imagining a protective line around your energy. After the event, do a short adjustment practice. 5 breaths plus a brief journaling line. What did I take on that was not mine? The skill is to orchestrate without owning the emotional bill. Each of these moves is simple, precise, and programmatic. That's the point. When you translate pattern into practice, you stop blaming yourself and start conducting experiments. The 7 souls are not destinies, they are tools. They tell you where to apply the particle and where to allow the wave. Now let me give you the concrete training sequence I wish I'd had when I was still running on a loop of inspiration and collapse. This is a 2-day micro-protocol designed to teach you how to identify the required state and to switch between particle and wave without drama. It's modular.
You can repeat it every week or compress it into one intense practice day if you prefer. The key is iteration. Small, repeatable experiments build trust. Day 1. The Hour of Witness plus 3 commitment hinges. Start your day with a short anchoring practice. Sit quietly for 3 minutes. Breathe slowly into your belly for the count of 4, pause briefly, exhale the count of 6. In these breaths, ask one question. What does my system want to do right now? Narrow, widen, or stabilize? Don't seek an elaborate answer. Notice the felt sense, tightness, openness, fog, and give it a label. Doing, field, or fuzzy. For the next hour, perform the noticing exercise I mentioned earlier. Whenever you feel a change, name it. Keep a small notebook or voice memo. The instruction is simple. Label experience, do not judge. If you feel resistance to naming, name the resistance. If you feel a surge of clarity, label that too. At the end of the hour, write 3 short lines. 1 insight, 1 body cue, 1 small action you could take.
Following the hour, choose 3 hinge opportunities that are currently unresolved. A hinge is something small that could change momentum. A single email you haven't sent, a short call, a prototype you haven't shared. For each hinge, ask the question aloud. Does this require particle or wave? If the answer is particle, schedule a focused 25-minute block. The Pomodoro model works well, with explicit outcome, e.g., finish and send the first draft. Before the block, perform a 1-minute coherence routine. Breathe twice deeply, place a palm on the sternum, and say a short phrase that aligns belief and action, such as, I will move this forward. After the block, step back into openness for 5 minutes. Walk, stretch, or do nothing. If the hinge calls for wave, schedule a 20 to 40-minute receptive practice, a walk without phone, an open journal, a listening session where you ask, what wants to emerge here? After the receptive time, note the small next step. It can be as tiny as draw 1 sketch or make 1 call. Each hinge is a test. The intention is to see if small, state-aligned action produces different outcomes than your previous habitual approach. Record results in a simple structure: hinge, state chosen, action taken, outcome, felt sense after. Keep it lightweight. The goal is accumulating micro-evidence that state matching matters. Day 2, the switch training. Begin with a slightly longer warm-up, 5 minutes of breath sensing, then a 60-second body scan. Note where tension sits. Label it. Then choose 3 tasks that are deliberately different in orientation. One that clearly requires particle energy, e.g. submitting paperwork, one that clearly needs wave attention, e.g. incubating a creative idea, and one that is hybrid, e.g. negotiating a delicate conversation. Task 1, particle. Before action, do a 2-minute priming sequence. Clear distractions, set a timer for a short block, 15 to 30 minutes, and enact a small physical anchor, pressing fingertips together or drawing a quick circle on paper while repeating your outcome statement. Act for the period with focused attention. After the block, note the felt sense and whether you experienced coherence. Did belief, action, attention, and feeling align? If yes, slightly extend the block next time. If not, reduce scale and rebuild. Task 2, wave. Prepare by setting the frame. A question held lightly, a clean time frame for non-action, 30 to 45 minutes, and a gentle auditory cue if helpful, a soft bell. During this time, practice listening. Notice images, moods, small intuitive nudges. Do not force solutions. Afterward, write the first tiny concrete step that emerged and commit to acting on it within 24 hours. Practice not correcting the emergent idea immediately. Allow it to breathe.
Task 3, hybrid. For the hybrid task, do a split sequence. 15 minutes of particle focus to create a clear initial form, followed by a 45-minute wave-friendly window where you release control and allow responses to appear. Then return to a short particle action to consolidate whatever came through. This alternation trains the nervous system to shift rapidly between modes while maintaining coherence. Throughout day 2, practice micro-calibrations. A quick breath pattern when you notice pull toward reactivity, a 3-second grounding gesture if you sense absorption, a short check-in phrase, why this now, when opportunities flood in. End the day with a 5-minute integration. Note what shifted, what felt coherent, and one tiny ritual you will carry forward for the next week. There are a few practical clarifications to avoid common errors. First, when I say do a non-action or allow the field, I don't mean passive avoidance. Wave work is disciplined. It requires a clear question, a committed time boundary, and an intention to notice and record emergent content. Second, particle focus is not frantic busywork. It's intention-led, time-boxed, and tied to measurable outcomes.
Both modes require structure. One is not softer than the other. Third, these practices are experiments, not guarantees. They increase the probability that systems will reorganize in desirable ways because they reduce internal noise. Beyond the 2-day protocol, there are micro-rituals and anchoring practices that, over weeks, turn state switching into a habit. These are small, repeatable, and honest methods that integrate cognition and body. Morning coherence check, 2 minutes. Stand, soften the jaw, breathe 3 full breaths. Ask, one thing to do today that needs focus, one thing to allow. Keep the list to one of each. This reduces scatter. Midday 5 minutes. Stop, close your eyes, and mentally scan from feet to crown. Name the current mode. If you're in doing and the rest of the day requires field, take a 5-minute receptive practice. If you are in field but need to deliver a report, close your phone, set a 30-minute block, and produce 1 page or 1 concrete paragraph. Evening micro-integration, 3 minutes. Jot down 3 wins, however small. This habit anchors micro-success into identity. A win can be an email sent, a conversation held, or a moment you didn't react. Over time, this simple archive builds trust that coherence is real and reproducible. Boundary ritual for the catalyst, 1 minute before any meeting. Place both hands at the heart. Breathe in and visualize a circle around your energy. Intone a brief phrase. I hold what I can, I release what I cannot. After the meeting, a quick triage. What is yours? What is not? What requires follow-up?
Grounding routine for the disassociated, 10 minutes daily. Choose 3 short somatic practices, a 2-minute walk with attention on feet, a 5-minute stretch where sensations are named, and 1 mindful eating moment without screens. These anchor the spiritual field in the living tissue of the body. Amplification move for the aligner, weekly. Publish 1 small outcome, teach 1 small thing, or invite someone into a 5-minute conversation about what's working. The practice of publicizing tiny coherence dissolves perfectionism and scales practice. Reintegration habit for the oscillator, microcheck before starting. Breathe 2 slow, full breaths. Say aloud, 1 small step. This breaks cycles of all or nothing and trains momentum to accumulate. Trial seeker reset, 7-day micro-experiment. Pick a single practice already tried and narrow it to 7 days, 5 minutes per day, with 1 recorded line. Today I did X. Keep the scope so small that resistance to starting collapses. Small, repeatable data rebuilds trust. All of these plug into the primary sensor, the felt sense. Keep returning to it. The felt sense is not mystical bureaucracy, it is feedback. When your chest tightens, attention fragments, or fatigue appears without cause, treat it like a dashboard light. Check the inputs. What belief is running beneath the surface? What action contradicts what you say you want? What attention habits are scattering your resources? Let me offer a few tactical examples of how this plays out in everyday life, because abstract models only become powerful when translated into lived decisions. Decision making. Suppose you are offered 2 paths: launch a product now or wait for 1 more iteration. Use the protocol. Label your state. If you are in particle mode, ask whether you can set a time-boxed execution period to ship. If you're in wave mode, schedule a receptive incubation so the right features emerge. The right choice is not always send it. It's the choice that matches state to requirement. You create a structure where both sensitivity and decisiveness are tools, not opposites. Relationships. When communication is tense, notice whether you or the other person are in particle or wave. A particle tension demands clarification, concrete requests, and time-bound conversations. A wave tension benefits from an opening where you hold space and listen. Many arguments escalate because 2 people try to apply the same mode simultaneously. Recognizing mode difference reduces reactivity and builds more precise responses. Creativity. An idea that arrives in the field needs a hinge into form. Instead of forcing it into a finished product immediately, incubate it overnight with receptive attention, then commit 1 short block the next day to translate the emergent shape into an artifact. Repeat this rhythm: open, incubate, render, release. Over time, you'll find creative outputs rev more often and with less collapse. Energy management.
If you feel depleted despite rest, pick 1 tiny action that restores agency. Send 1 message, make 1 appointment, complete 1 small organizing task. Agency restores coherence more reliably than passive rest alone. Now let's consider the collective dimension. Individual coherence does not live only inside your chest. In systems thinking terms, fields influence fields. When a person stabilizes their inner alignment, their presence shifts the immediate social field. That can be literal or subtle. A group conversation that previously scattered now finds a rhythm. A small team begins to deliver more consistently. A family conversation returns to calm after 1 member steadies their posture. This is not mysticism about vibes as magic. It's social transmission of patterns. When someone models steadiness, others often mirror it because humans are wired for resonance. Because of this, the work you do in private ripples outward. That's why the aligner's public move matters. Coherence left private is a practice. Coherence offered publicly is a contribution. The catalyst's containment matters because it protects networks from survivor burnout. The dissociate's grounding matters because presence without integration can create confusion in relationships. The doer's precision matters because decisive action legitimizes trust. In short, personal mastery is not individualism, it's field stewardship. A few ethical guardrails here. Use these practices to become more reliable, not manipulative. Do not employ state tactics to coerce people into things they haven't consented to. If you feel drawn to optimize other states, return to the catalyst's ritual and check for over-responsibility. If you are in pain, seek appropriate professional support, medical, psychological, legal, and use these practices as complementary skills, not replacements. We arrive now at a question people often ask in private messages. How quickly will this change things? My answer is always the same. Recognition itself moves the needle. When you can name how you're operating, your nervous system often relaxes. But durable change requires repetition, micro-practices performed daily for weeks. Expect small wins, not sudden transcendence. Expect increased probability, not guarantees. Expect your life to reconfigure in ways that are often incremental and sometimes unmistakably significant. The difference between hit or miss and reliable alignment is not a single hero moment. It is dozens of small intentional choices that accumulate. There's a final practice I want to give you because it has been wildly useful to people I coach. I call it the coherence hinge, a 5-minute pre-action routine that orients your system before any important move. Use it for presentations, difficult conversations, creative releases, business calls, or personal boundaries. Coherence hinge, 5 minutes. 1. Sit or stand comfortably. Place one hand on your chest and one on your belly.
Take 3 slow breaths into both places.
2. Name the desired outcome in a sentence, but phrase it as process, not demand. I will speak clearly, rather than they must agree. 3. Choose one body anchor, pressing fingertips, a small stamp, or a physical posture. Perform it with intent. 4. Visualize one next step that is realistic and specific. I will ask for 5 minutes of their time. I will send the document by 3 p.m. 5. Exhale and release the visualization. Take one small physical step forward. Stand, open a document, make a call. The aim is to move from internal calibration into external movement seamlessly. The hinge is not a magic button. It's an engine preheat. It reduces friction by aligning the inner field right before a critical particle moment, or by framing intention before a receptive window. Where does this leave us? You have a map, a set of archetypes, short experiments, micro-rituals, and a 2-day protocol to train the nervous system. That is a practical toolkit. But the real shift occurs when you begin to live with curiosity about your states, not judgment. The skill is to be curious about when you're pushing, when you're opening, and whether those choices align with the task at hand. As you experiment, notice what changes. Fewer humiliating false starts, more intact relationships, creativity that sustains, and a sense of agency that isn't frantic. Don't expect perfection. Expect a kind of craftsmanship, the ability to shape attention, emotion, belief, and action in service of what matters. One last story, brief and practical. A friend who runs a small community arts organization was stuck. Projects started and dissolved, volunteers burned out, and funding cycles faltered. He began using the hinge protocol. Before every meeting, he'd do a 1-minute coherence ritual. During planning, they practiced splitting time into particle blocks, roles, deadlines, deliverables, and wave blocks, open brainstorming, community listening. They also implemented a 2-minute closure ritual after events where organizers listed one concrete win and one small next step. Within a season, volunteer retention improved, projects that once collapsed completed, and the organization began to build a modest reserve. The change wasn't a single breakthrough. It was multiple small structural shifts that reduced noise and allowed momentum to build. If this finds you,
You are not meant to stay ordinary. There is a practical craft beneath the romance of revelation. It is not flashy, it is steady. It asks you to notice, to choose, to practice, and to be kind to yourself when the system wanders. The 7 souls are both a mirror and a map. Name the pattern, do the small next thing, and trust the data.
When you are ready to go deeper, I will publish the next session where we practice specific protocols that teach you to shift state on demand, timed alternations, sensory anchors that trigger wave or particle, group coherence exercises, and a week-long scaffold to ingrain these skills into daily life. That video will guide you through step-by-step movement practices and provide downloadable checklists so you can train reliably. For now, do the noticing hour if you can today. Choose one hinge and apply the micro-prescription for your soul. Keep a tiny journal. Label state, note action, record felt sense. That low-effort habit is enough to begin changing the rules of engagement between you and reality. I'm grateful you stayed with this. Recognition changes systems. Small acts compound. Coherence is a craft you can learn. If any of the 7 souls found you, hold that recognition like a compass, not as a label that traps, but as a pointer to the exact next thing to practice. If this finds you, you're not meant to stay ordinary. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video, the hands-on protocols for shifting states at will. Go practice and come back to tell me what you noticed.